the note. Oh, I bet it's working now, but my computer is now repeating it. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Christy, for getting that going. Okay, for those on Zoom, if you're interested in joining in there's a discussion, please note in the Q&A the first time your name comes up. Again, please include your name and where you're at, first and last name and where you're at. And please reference what you are responding to, because by the time we notice it, it's entirely possible that the discussion will have moved on and we want to know what you're talking about. Thank you. We will now move on to our agenda items, the first one of which is discussion of the superintendent goals. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moshe to present on that.
Thank you. The switch to make sure my screen switches. There we go. So I'm going to go through this as a PowerPoint, but at the end of the PowerPoint is a link to the entire goals document. I didn't just put it all up there, action plans in detail, though the board did receive that ahead of time. I'm going to talk through it and certainly stop me at any point if you have questions or want more detail. And I'd be happy to provide that. So the board set a vision and mission for our district some time ago now, making sure that our students are lifelong learners who are multiculturally engaged, literate, and active in their community. And if you've been following along, you know that our students certainly demonstrate that vision. And our mission is to collaborate with our community and support our students in being resilient, innovative, compassionate, and productive. So that's what guides us. The board then set goals, and I'll go through each one of the goals. The goals were set for the superintendent by the board with community input last spring, and we developed action plans around them, and we have been working through those goals as a school community. So creating a culture of care was certainly something that we knew was essential coming off a 2.5-year pandemic. It had also been part of our school culture to be using some restorative structures. So to go through to this goal fit right in with the work we were already doing. So again, I'm going to go through each one. They seem sort of in themselves, perhaps out of context, and I'm happy to give context if needed. But what we did this year was we worked on a culture of care using restorative practices, and we met as a team. We had a team of 14 folks that were trained this summer by a group called RJ Ed, or Restorative Justice Education. And they worked with us for 4 days, 8 hours a day, to train the team on the 16 modules that go along with restorative practices. The first 6 are really all about building community. And that's the work we started this year and continue to do. Those first 6 modules, our entire faculty, staff, and group was trained back in August. We went through what it means to be in a community circle, how this work actually creates a school community of students. We then trained 28 students at the first part of, well, mid-year, and we continued to train our staff once a month so that by the end of June, they are through all 16 modules. The last 4 modules are really designed around a major harm being done and what it's like to be in a tier 3 situation, meaning that someone did tremendous harm and there's a group that responds to that. That's not the majority of the training. The majority of the training is around creating community and interacting with one another. We continued to do that throughout the year. And we also have been looking at what is the impact. And that information is still coming in. The survey we did with staff was all about the training itself and how well did that go and is it effective and is it used? And 70% of our staff said that in fact they used it and they found it effective and they wanted us to continue, not necessarily with this intense training, but with the work. And the 30% of the staff felt that it was not exactly what they had hoped for. We're in the process of doing the CEE survey, which is again another data point for us to see if this culture of care work has had an impact on our community.
And if you're a parent, you will have gotten the link to that in your email in the last 24 hours.
That's correct. And all of our students received that link today. And I believe the high school and middle school students actually had an opportunity to complete that survey today. And the community received that survey, as you said, and so did all of our staff. So we'll see what that information brings to us at the beginning of May when we go over those results right here during a board workshop on May 10th. So once we get all of that information and we see what's been effective and what needs to be improved, we'll create modules for learning for next year around continuing our culture of care. That was really the focus of goal one. Certainly I'll.
Quick question on
Yep.
the very last thing you said. Do you anticipate that that would again be with a professional development organization, or do you feel like the district now has has built its internal capability around culture of care and restorative justice?
We actually talked about that in our team meeting with the small group and felt that we had enough of a skill set in-house that we could develop our modules over the summer and continue the work by modifying how we work with our staff. It would still be a once a month cadence for training, but it will be much more practical. There are some folks who felt that the way they characterize it is that this is all about a circle. Circle is really a means to creating community. And so we need to go more in depth on what does that mean. Our students, in fact, gave us some very significant feedback because after they went through a full 2 days of training, and after that training felt that what they've been seeing in some of their classes represented the training they received, and some of what they were seeing in their classes had little to do with the training they received. So bringing together that what we're hoping to accomplish and what is in fact happening is what we're planning.
Thank you.
And it all dovetails with everything we've been doing around sense of belonging, equity, diversity, inclusion. It really rolls it all into, it's really about creating community and having everyone feel valued and participating in their community.
And we actually timed that really well, considering that Washington State School Directors Association was all about belonging this year, their conference. So that was very helpful for me to see how that was working other places too.
The other thing to note is that the RCW requires that school districts provide training next year in particular around a topic that relates to cultural responsiveness, equity, diversity. So we will be right in line with what we're required to do, and it's part of what we plan to do.
Is that a yearly training starting next year or a one-time requirement?
It's an every other year. I'm not clear on what every other year means in their language, because it looks like you begin it in the 23-24 school year and continue every other year. I think that means every other year, but doesn't mean every year. Anyway, we receive funding, and that's another piece of this is to meet that requirement. We receive funding through OSPI and the state to do this work. And so we used that funding for the training over the course of the current year. And we will continue next year.
Excellent.
Our second goal was prioritizing training and implementation of best practices. This really speaks to universal design for learning, inclusive practices, and work around our school improvement plans. So the board has seen the school improvement plans, and they were presented in the fall. And then again, we did an update. They were very specific, and I will give you a footnote here that we will become even more specific as we go forward, because part of what OSPI does on an annual basis, but hadn't done for 3 years, is identify schools on tiers. And again, it's an odd way of identifying schools that are meeting all of their requirements are called foundational. And schools that may require additional help are tiered. And so one of our groups at the elementary level, because again, it's broken down by demographics. So we have students, for example, of different ethnicities are categorized, I guess, for lack of a better word, and students of low socioeconomic status and students who have disabilities. And so they're measured within the entirety of the group, but also in each strand. And so one of our strands was below the level that they are supposed to be. That's students with disabilities. So we are required to put an action plan together around that. That's very, very specific for the entire program, not just the strands that may have been deficient. So Susie and her team have been working on that along with Jeff. It's a K-5 plan that has to go into place for September. We have an advisor from OSPI helping with that. So we're well on our way, and you'll see more about that. That just came to us in the last couple of weeks. But again, that's part of our work anyway. So we're actually thinking about using the particular plan design for all of our schools, again, because we want to remain consistent. And it certainly talks about goals and action plans and data and defining the work ahead. So more to follow on that, but the school improvement plans certainly were very well developed this year and in sync with the district goals. And so we will continue to review the data and again, bring you more information as we go forward. This doesn't do justice to the workshop that you had on the mid-year update for school improvement plans, but you've seen it. It's on the website as well if folks want to go back to it and take a look at the in-depth description. Another thing that's coming your way in May, and want to give some kudos to Kayla for leading this effort. She's the curriculum leader for the district, and she has a team of folks that's working on our English language arts curriculum. And they are planning to provide you with a K-12 recommendation for English language arts curriculum at the end of the year in May, as well as likely our science curriculum. So you'll hear more about that in May when you have a full presentation on curriculum. So that's well underway. Our third goal is the use of our facilities. We spent a lot of time over the summer and early fall talking about all of the land that the district owns, as well as all of the facilities and their use. And the board at the beginning of the school year made the decision to move the 5th and 6th grade from their current campus to make the elementary North Campus a K-5, and then move to have a middle school program at the secondary campus for a 6-8, and then keep the 9-12 there. So that is underway. Again, you heard a little bit about all of the plans for helping our students adjust to a new spot and having older students come down and greet them, and teachers working with students and kind of cross-pollinating. So that's underway. And finally, we are in the midst of a bond vote. Worked for a couple of years actually to put this work together. Started in 2019, then the pandemic hit, it all went on hold, and we picked up again last spring, held public forums, and did all of the work, as the board knows, surveyed our community and so on. And we'll see where we are on the 26th after the vote concludes on the 25th. So once again, I have this complete document that's color coded for your viewing pleasure that outlines specifically that action plan in much more detail, with green being things that we've accomplished, yellow being in process. And then there are comments on there as well. So if anyone, including the community, wants to look at it in more depth, can certainly click on the link. These slides will be posted. I'm happy to take any questions. Talk about anything else in more depth. Sure. Where it is currently, and they are requesting to use all 4 rooms in that pod, and that's likely what we're going to do. So they will stay where they are. And you bring that up, the district offices will move to where the offices are at the South Campus now, so they won't be alone in that space. And Susie will still be the administrator in charge.
And some of the students from up here will be going down there for PE. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
PE and band will stay down there, though we aren't sure where we're going to put band yet, but we're trying to utilize the space efficiently and yet make it comfortable. So band may be up here or somewhere, but we're trying to also reduce our footprint down there.
Two questions around goal 3. When we were deciding on the reconfiguration, there are two things that came up that we continued to say, let's talk about that later. One of which was the plan for the South Campus other than ALE expanding. And then the other was more details on how the secondary campus would fit. The latter seems more of a less of a board decision, but perhaps of interest, at least for like an update to the board. But for the former, I'm curious when it might be a good time for the board to discuss or hear options for South Campus. Or maybe that's also not a board decision. That may also be a building level decision.
Well, so the South Campus, there's one of you that has a map that they can bring up, and I'll stop sharing and you can share, or maybe I can find it. I can talk and do that at the same time. So the South Campus at this point, the building closest to us, that's not the gym, is called the A-Pod. That A-Pod will be vacated. So there will be 4 classrooms there and restrooms that would be available should we want to continue renting. The space that's currently occupied farthest over, which is Mother Mentors, they will continue to be there. ECAP will continue to be there. That's the early childhood program. They may expand a little, and there's another room there that they may want to use. The B-Pod, which is where band is, and garden, will continue to have the garden program because they need 2 rooms. I mean, that program it's culinary for part of it and garden for part of it. But if the band program moves out of there, we're trying to reduce what we have to clean, bottom line, because we are reducing custodial service. So that's one piece. And then we do have that one whole A-Pod building that we could rent, like we rent the other spaces on the South Campus that aren't used by students. And we're always careful to rent with compatible programs. So we haven't put that into motion because we're trying to do all of the things that need to be done. In terms of the secondary campus, we talked about it actually again today. That, I'm not sure if the board is aware of this or the community, but our director of maintenance and facilities took another position in community transit. And so good for him, move up and so on, but bad for us. He left just before break. So we are filling that position in-house right now. So we have a list of things that we need to make sure we accomplish. Signage, which we have a plan for at the middle school, high school campus. We're putting up a partition so that the 6 through 8 has its own space that's very defined. There'll be a different entrance for students when they come in off the buses and so on. So those plans are underway for doing that work. And Kayla and John and Jeff have really been working on helping students to transition and figuring out space. And we have some teacher moves that have to happen, but we're still in process.
And I
Thank
know
you.
this is something we discussed during the fall, but getting student input on that also. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Through the
Student input
advisory-
is already happening.
I-
Their students are doing the orientation and planning and, what is it that students would like or need and so on. Yeah,
I
I'm
assume that was the case.
abbreviating it,
Yeah.
but yes, the
Yeah.
students are very involved.
Yeah, I have 20 student leaders that are current seventh graders that are they're presenting on the first at the 5-6 campus. And we're also recruiting questions right now. And so those are kind of fun to read at a time. It also gets us an idea of where their anxieties are and their excitement is. And then we'll have them down at the end of May to do tours as well. And then I'm in conversation with the teachers that are going to come and join our staff as well.
Excellent. Like I said, like I was saying, I was pretty certain that was happening, but I just wanted to get it out there so the board and public knew that we were following through on what we'd been talking about earlier,
Appreciate the question.
because that is something that Audrey brought up that was very important as well.
And in the event that as the board supports the bond, in the event that the bond should pass, that also will involve lots of conversation with the community once we get underway with design and implementation. Other questions about the superintendent's goals and progress? Comments, concerns?
I think we're good then. Thank you very much. I like that we're setting up this regular cadence for checking in on the school improvement plans, the board goals, and that. It's something that I struggled with planning early in my tenure as chair. And so I'm glad that we're getting that settled in so we can get these updates to the board and the community.
And Dr. Moshe, I just want to thank you for the process and the way that you present this information to us and the levels of granularity that you give us access to in these reports. It's very helpful. Thank you.
+1, and also the progress itself has been commendable. And
It's a team effort. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to discussion of board goals. I'm going to see if I can share my screen briefly.
Let me stop sharing mine.
Yeah, I just pulled together the goals that we had that the board set for itself and noted a few things that I had thought of as progress to those goals or things we still need to do towards those goals. So I just wanted to have a chance to go through goal by goal and talk about how we're doing and what we still can accomplish towards those goals. This is again, goals that we gave ourselves. And I know that Joe has been consistently pushing for smarter goals, things that are more easily tracked. And I think that there's going to be some great discussion on that this coming year when we set our goals for next year. So goal 1, maintain focus on district goals, mission and vision through continued involvement in professional development and expected board duties. I wanted to try to open this up for discussion. Like I said, I was just putting down a couple of things that I thought of as progress that we had made, but anything that folks have thoughts on that we've done well or still have room to do or improve upon would be welcome. I just know we continued updating policy as appropriate with an eye toward alignment with school mission and vision, including as well as the goals provided to the superintendent. We attended the WASDA focus with WASDA conference with a focus on belonging, advocated upward. Thank you to those who were able to go to the Day on the Hill, to the state legislature, and continued elevating and encouraging student voice in board meetings, which we'll be talking about more of later on in this meeting. Other thoughts on things that we can be working on better on this goal?
I just think that the way our student representatives have participated, especially in the legislative advocacy work, has just been an extraordinary example of our mission and vision in action. Talk about engaged community members. And that's just been something that I'm really proud to see and to help encourage more of.
Thank you, Marnie. I think the board this year has worked really well on analyzing our policies to fit our mission, vision, and goals, and really analyzing, are these inclusive? Are these equitable? Do these suit every student? And really like looking deep into policies and something that might not be on the surface level, but if you really look about how it's implemented and then how it affects students. And then I think for sure, continuing elevating student voice is super important. I hope there's a way we can bring in more student voice into board meetings beyond just student representatives, whether it be through a panel or the student presentations have been another excellent way of having students present and be able to express their experience in the classroom.
Looking at this goal, I have a deep appreciation for all the professional development we've been able to be a part of and be party to as we've worked through, as our amazing admin and staff have worked through restorative coaching and those things. Just being able to be part of that and being there in the ground up work has been really wonderful. And I felt really welcomed by the in-service day in August and all of the times that we've been part of a workshop or a program. I really have felt welcomed and invited to the table. So thank you for that.
On policy, I really like how we have scrutinized the WASDA provided policy a little more closely just to figure out what's the intent of it and how's it going to work for our district. And I really want to thank Director Downs for translating or interpreting the policy and its impact. It's given me the information I need to make good decisions on our policy.
+1 to both of those. I also want to give a shout out to our administrators being here to provide their expert boots on the ground knowledge of how the policies are implemented and affecting their buildings. We really appreciate you being here, even if you don't speak up much. Okay, thank you. And by the way, for the reminder of the training that we did, the RJ Ed training, which I thought about but hadn't put on there. So I just tossed that up there on the end. Our second goal that we gave ourselves was keeping the community informed of our actions in a concise, values-aligned manner. Dr. Moshe reminded me of something else that we had here, the community survey about the bond. Just communication is always going to be one of my pushes, because I think that if the community elects us, we need to be talking to them about what we're doing. So I'm really glad to see the effort that's been put into here to working to shorten the length of meetings to keep them accessible to the community. Having multiple community meetings in regards to the bond and the shift in use of district locations to get feedback, adding the survey into that. I think that we've got room to grow on that. We've talked about having at the next board meeting note in the Navigator, and I have failed to provide that to Mr. Macaro. So that's something that I can work on going forward, or at the last board meeting, one or the other.
One thing that we've discussed in the past and that I've personally longed for would be more informal opportunities for the community to connect with board members in single or pair settings outside of a formal meeting. And I personally would love to attend something like a monthly, tea with a board member kind of a thing, just so that there's a chance for a member of the public to approach a person one-on-one and just have a chat about educational philosophy and things not on the agenda.
I'd love to share real quick that we've started back up our coffee with the principal every 2 weeks, and Brooke has been able to attend, kind of half wearing a parent hat and half wearing a board hat. And it's been incredibly valuable to be in that informal setting, like you say. And we had about, 12, 15 people last time, and it was really wonderful to have you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for letting me talk some at that in my board role. It's been fantastic, both hearing as a parent what's going on there and also being able to chime in on things that other parents may not know about, like school funding, how broken the prototypical school model is, what they can do to talk to their legislators about how broken the prototypical school model is, and also what bills are currently in the legislature and how they can advocate for that as well.
I want to plus one this idea and not necessarily tea, but more broadly speaking, a way for there to be a informal dialogue that's not either a workshop or a business meeting. I really like that idea.
I've really appreciated all of the students we've had in our business meetings, sharing things with us. And also I've really appreciated our student representatives bringing to us what's going on in the school district, because that shares with the whole community what kinds of things we can participate in to support students in sports and music and science and all of the beautiful things that are happening. So I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Another thing I'd like to add, I guess it relates to keeping students informed, which I believe are also part of our community. But having board members go into classrooms and sit in on, classroom discussions has been really crucial this year. And I feel like for me, I've seen students more engaged with what the board does because they're like, oh, Brooke came into our class this week and there's like, oh, okay, he's the board chair. So just being able to make those connections is really important. And it's something I'd like to see more of as well. Another thing that I guess is part of coming out of a worldwide pandemic, but I think hybrid meetings and especially posting them on YouTube has been so important in keeping our community informed because yeah, it's hard to make, a meeting at 6:30 on a Wednesday night, but when you're able to look back at that YouTube meeting at a different time and really look into what's being discussed is really crucial to be able to suit other people's needs and their schedule as well. Another thing I would like to see hopefully this coming year is maybe summed up reports of the meeting. Maybe it could be, underneath the YouTube video, like I guess as the bio, just so you can have an even more concise summary.
I like that idea and would be happy to write those up so that we can and get them to you if we can arrange that, or the top comment or something. Yeah, there are minutes available. Yeah.
On the board docs, if you go where the link is for the video, there's the agenda and then there's a link to the minutes. So you don't have to look at the ones that are in the next meeting for signature. You can actually look at each meeting and it's kind of a summary of what happened at the meeting.
Did we do the Zoom, the community Q&A this year or last year?
Yes, we did. I believe that was this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, yeah, we
will-
should add that to the
Yeah.
accomplishments.
Good. I was feeling like that was a little thin, and mostly it was because I forgot a bunch of things that we did. Those school visits have been incredibly valuable for me also, just sitting down and talking with students. I was in a science class and spent with the teacher's blessing a good 2/3 of the class talking about the bond and what a bond was and what it meant for the school and answering their questions. They had so many questions about what it was and how it was going to affect them and how it was going to affect other students there. And that was just so phenomenal to see them that engaged. So getting them those opportunities is fantastic. So principals expect an email from me in the next couple of days to set up another visit.
I was just going to say that there are many things that support the board goals that we do as a system in terms of communicating. So, whether it's the navigator or, I had the opportunity, I was invited to speak with the League of Women Voters about, what's happening in the district. So the board's goal does permeate all of the other things that we do. So it's not just the board that has to carry the goals.
Well, and I think that actually speaks very well to the importance of aligning these goals with the goals that we give to the superintendent, which we thought about more intensely this year than we have in past years. So speaking of which, this one will look familiar from goal 2 for the superintendent, which was model universal design for learning at board meetings and participate in shared professional development on this subject with the employees of the district. Some of the things that we've done is brought students and staff to board meetings to get direct feedback on how things are going in schools, demonstrated RJ Ed principles, including circles at board workshops. And I expect we'll be doing that more as we start setting goals for next year, because I think it's a good way to ground us all and bring us all together into a single conversation. Provided both visual and auditory information whenever possible to engage multiple learning methods. That's why, for instance, I'm sharing the screen right now, is because I know that I'm not a good auditory learner. So I'm sure that there are others out there who appreciate being able to read the stuff rather than having to listen to it. Something I noticed that we didn't actually get a chance to do as a board was sharing professional development with employees of the district on UDL. So that's something we can either look into going forward this year or try to carry through to next year. And that is difficult because it does take the employees of the district working on UDL and being willing to share that time with us. So we want to be careful and thoughtful of the drain on resources and time for our staff as well.
I would say one thing for me here that is a plus and also a to work on is continuing to demystify the language of education with the public, making sure when we're using acronyms or abbreviations that we are explaining what those mean, and really welcoming questions around what it is we're saying when we're using specific education language. And I also think this is a, plus one to what Audrey said before. The minutes are available, making sure that we have ways to, so people know that, because some people don't have, don't understand how to access that. And so then how do we create that access that's more easy for people?
I'm particularly thinking of people who may not have had experience with public boards or meetings that take minutes and may not know what the minutes are.
So I think all of these things are wonderful and great ways that we provide accommodations or that we are supporting. I do think that our understanding of what UDL is evident in what we are putting up here. And so I would encourage us as a board to maybe do some of our own learning on what are universal design for learning practices, because I think what we have mentioned above is great. I don't know that we understand how they connect, and I don't think all of them connect the way we think they do. So I would just encourage us to look at that. In terms of how I see us model it, I see us leaning into each other's strengths and allowing people to bring that to the table. So for example, we recognize that Director Greenherron has an incredibly analytical and strategic mind, and finding ways to bring that into the conversation through how we've adjusted Superintendent Moshe's goals and how we track. That would be an example of UDL. Leveraging Director Marnie and Director Jackson's just amazing skill with the pen is an example of leaning into UDL. I think the above mentioned are great things that we do, but universal design for learning is really about how do we showcase our ability to contribute to the best of our ability in a unique way without staying as rigid. That's also really hard when boards are run by Robert's rules.
Thank you for sharing that expertise. And yes, Robert's rules do not make for accommodations very well. You're quite right on that.
Yes, but UDL is not accommodations.
Plus one to the thank you for bringing this to our attention. And I would say on like a meta level, I think it's important for us to understand what a goal is before we adopt it, because now we're most of the way through the year with perhaps misinformed notions about what the words in this goal.
This also brings me back to a past pattern of activity that our former board compositions have engaged in, which is a study or work book study group of some sort. And I know that we're also busy professionals with families and day jobs, but I would really enjoy reading recommendations and learning resources on topics like this where we have room to improve.
Just checking to see there don't appear to be any QA from the,
May I make a quick recommendation?
absolutely.
Katie Novak has a great book called UDL Now. And our staff has been doing that as a book study this year as a way to live this goal. So that's a suggestion.
Great. I'll look for it. Thanks.
I suspect we can lend you a copy.
Yes, if the staff has been doing that work, there's probably several copies in the district. Thank you for the recommendation. That sounds like a fantastic thing that we could start working on forward. Any other thoughts, comments on these board goals? Okay, I am going to stop my screen sharing. And let's move on to the next point on here, which is our food service program, discussing whether to how to take a request for proposal or talking about in-house food service program. I'll turn this over to Dr. Musha, who I expect will turn it over to someone else.
Dan's got it.
Yeah, and while we transition, I'd like to point out that we have both Rachel and John here who are with our food service management company that we currently have. So as we get into discussion, if there's technical questions, I'm going to point to one of those because they are much more informed than I am. I'd like to share a little bit of information about what we're doing currently before we get into the discussion about what we do in the future. So I'm a numbers guy, so I'm going to start with the balance sheet, the revenue and expenditure part of things. And it's a 6-year look at our revenue and expenditure. The top part is revenue, the bottom part expenditure, and there's a profit or loss line at the bottom. And as you can see, starting, well, as long as I've been here, we have supported our food service program because it has never generated a profit, whether we were in-house or we were a food service management company. And typically is about $175,000 to $200,000 a year. You will notice that in 2021, that deficit dropped dramatically, and that was because we were not in person at that time. We were providing sack lunches that were delivered to families and picked up by families, so our labor costs were much less. Also, our revenue was less that year. Last year, all meals were free for all students. It was part of a federal program. And so we generated a lot more revenue than we normally would have because we fed more kids and we also received a higher reimbursement rate. But again, it's about $139,000 support to the program. Currently, you can see that we have generated about 181,000 and expended about 253. So there's a slight difference in there. The one thing I do point out in the revenue side of it, as we look at revenue, and I'll jump to the next screen, is that this year there's something called supply chain assistance. So it's only happening this year. It's to help offset the costs of the increase in food product. So that has generated more revenue than we normally would have. But if you look at the revenue, we basically get it from 3 particular places. The first is local food sales. That's if you are a student or an adult who buys meals on a daily basis, that's local revenue. The majority of our funding, especially the last 2 years, almost all of our funding was from the federal government, because with free meals, we weren't selling any product to students or adults. So that's a big difference. But even before that, a majority of our funding did come from the federal government as a reimbursement for the meals that we provide. And in order to do that, there's some requirements, which we'll talk a little bit about later on, but it's a large funding source for us. So the federal reimbursement, this is the current rate. And so if we provide a meal for a student who is deemed free, we get reimbursed $2.26. If it's a reduced price meal, we get $1.96, and then we get 50 cents if paid. So this is something new, this paid piece that we get a little more, and that's why you see a higher dollar amount. If it's a severe need breakfast, that because we are in a location that has a high poverty rate and we only have one small program that fits that category, you get a little bit more money. And then our lunches, because we're less than 60% free and reduced, and I'll explain that in a minute, we get $4.33 for a free meal, $3.93, and the difference is offset by the state for that 40 cents. So it's a much higher reimbursement rate than we would normally get, and that's one of the reasons why you see the higher revenue. For those that are buying their meals, we charge $2.25 at the elementary school and $2.50 at the secondary schools for breakfast, $4 for an adult, and lunch is $3.50, $3.75, and $5.50. So it's a little difference in there. So we look at participation real quickly. This top part is the number of students that qualify for free meals, and it's based on a criteria the federal government has set up. Or they could qualify as a reduced student, so they pay a little less. And if they don't qualify either one of those, then they would end up being a paid, full paid student. And out of the 1,120 students, you can see that about roughly 375 qualify this year under free and reduced. Then we look at the number of days we operate. They're different every month based on the number of school days. And then the bottom part is the number of meals that we serve. And this is for our lunch. If it says non-reimbursable, that's probably an adult staff member buying a meal. Then this number of free meals, reduced meals, which if you add those together, it's about 17,000 year to date. And then the paid meals, which is a little over 18,000. So it's a fairly even split between the meals that are free, reduced, and paid. Roughly 5,000 a month or so, depending on the month and the number of days, et cetera, that type of thing. But if we look at it on a daily basis, you can see that we provide in the lunch category about 106 free meals a day. And think back that we have 300 students that qualify. So about a third of the students, or 37%, are receiving meals that qualify for it. About 23 reduced prices, and then about 140 that kids are paying for. So it gives you an idea of what the participation is for lunch. We could do the same thing with breakfast. Breakfast participation is much lower than lunch. And one of the things we can talk about is we're not required to provide breakfast and lunch. Do we provide one or the other? Do we provide nothing? That's all the conversation. But it gives you the number of meals, and you can see it's about 12,000 breakfasts so far year to date, with a larger majority of those being free and reduced than you did in the lunch. The lunch had more paid meals, but less free and reduced. This is just the opposite. Again, daily, we're looking at about 90 breakfasts that we provide out of the 1,100 kids or so that we have in our school district. So there's three options really when we talk about this discussion today. We can have a food service management company. We can do it completely in-house with our own employees, but we will need somebody to manage the program and a dietitian type person, and I'll show you why in a moment. Or we can have no food service program at all. Food service like transportation, athletics, et cetera, are not funded by the state, are not required by the state. I think it's a requirement to feed kids, but it is not a legal requirement. So what does a food service management company do? What are their responsibilities if we hire somebody to do that? Well, first off, they provide the management and supervision of the program. So they bring somebody in to do that work. They also procure the food supplies. So we don't buy the groceries. Somebody else pays for those. They order all the federal commodities, the donated food you get through the federal government, the records we need for our monthly responsibilities, and then they promote efforts to increase participation through various ways, whether it's signage or programs that they do. And Rachel had kind of showed you some of the things that they were doing a few months ago. But the really one that, from my standpoint, is the big one, is that the food-based menu planning to ensure that they meet the meal patterns and the nutrient standards required by USDA to collect those federal dollars. If we don't meet those, we can't collect those reimbursable dollars. And as we looked, it's a large part of our funding. And it's just an example of the lunch meal pattern. And it talks about, what are the food components, the meat or meat alternate components, how much vegetables, fruits, grains, breads, minimum maximums you could have in calories, sodium, saturated fat, trans fat, et cetera. So it's all things when you build those menus, you have to fit within those particular categories. So it takes some expertise. So that's where I would say we would need a dietitian type person to understand all this in order to build menus that work. Breakfast has the same type of requirements built into it. So you look at the same type of thing. And then there's things like, grains and breads. Again, very restricted on how that works and what you can do. And this is just an example of, are the grains credible or whole grain? Will they work? Yes or no? So you have to be able to understand those type things. And the last part I want you to be aware of is that in the request for proposal, which we call an RFP process, it's a 110-day minimum timeline. So in order to get this done by the end of August, we need to start this in May. Basically, the state has to approve the RFP, and it's a 54-page document that we put out. Once they approve that, we publish it in the newspaper for 45 days. Basically it says, on 45 days from the published date, we are going to require proposals in. We give people an opportunity to come by and see what we're doing here, ask questions, answer those questions. And then we select, we score the proposals, we evaluate them, we select one. The board would then vote on, yes, we want them or we don't. We sign contracts. And then finally, we get that off to OSBI, and it has to be by August 31st to start September 1st. My proposal would actually have us having that done by the first part of August, but it's a long timeline, so it isn't something you can just do. The other thing is we are required, if we have a food service management company, to go out through this process every 5 years. So we are in the 5th year of our current contract. So we need to do it this year if we are going to move forward with this. And that was basically all I wanted to share with you, and then just open it up for your discussion about, what are we doing?
First of all, I'd like to note that every time I think that we've got a lot of restrictions as a school board and rules to follow and everything like that, getting a view inside what goes on in the district every day shows me how lightly we have it. Those meal planning charts. I'm sorry, Rachel.
That's why you have professional staff. That's why the board's not running the district.
Exactly. And thank you also. I'd also like to note, I'd really like to thank Rachel for the amount you go above and beyond. The board and administrators get a monthly update. There's talking about what's new in the program, what's hot at the various schools, no pun intended. And the work you've done to work with the garden program here and to scratch make so much of the food has been phenomenal, especially within the confines of a huge company and working at a tiny district. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Rachel as well. Just like over this past year, she's put a tremendous amount of effort into really focusing on student choice, whether it be, beverages or menus. So it's been really great to see in our cafeteria.
I've really seen a lot of responsiveness to community requests and concerns. And I feel that you've done a fantastic job of aligning the service you provide with the values of our community. And I think it's pretty extraordinary to see that done within the context of such a defined service in a complex system for a large, tiny district, but still a large institution. So thank you.
It's my personal belief that the third option, which Dan also suggested we not do, should be off the table because we need to feed students.
Agreed. Before we put that off the table completely, can you help me understand? So even though a student could qualify for a free meal, we're under no obligation to provide that meal to them?
Well, we will provide that meal, but they have to want the meal. Kind of like bringing a horse to water.
No, the question, I think what you're saying is, if they qualify, do we have to provide it? Only if we provide it for everyone else. If we choose as a district not to provide any meals to anyone, then we would not be obligated to our students who would qualify for free and reduced lunch.
Okay, that's the answer to my question.
Yeah.
And then a follow-up question is, does anybody know of any districts that are doing this and it is going well?
Doing what?
Not providing any, option 3, not providing.
I don't
any
know
food
of a
service to
district that
anybody.
doesn't provide food service. I also don't know of a district that doesn't quote unquote lose money, because food service, again, this is personal opinion as opposed to anything else, to act as though, to answer maybe your follow-up question, to act as though feeding students is an integral to their education, it is a fool's errand. It should be integral, just like transportation is not required. If we chose not to provide any transportation, that's a choice a district can make. If you do that, you deny kids access to school, but you can make that decision and it is not funded. So all of these things that, you talked about the prototypical school model. Dan and I have talked about when he presents the budget, and it was a suggestion by one of our board members. What would we have if it were a prototypical school model based on the state's level of funding? Not as he always does it, which is, they fund this much, but if they funded, if we only use the prototypical funding, for example, we have 2 nurses in the district next year, we'd have half a nurse for the whole district based on that funding. We'd have not even a full principal at the elementary level, I think it is. But these are the kinds of things that are just ridiculous to think about, but that's what a prototypical model is. Same thing with food and transportation. It is not funded, it is not required, but to run a district with neither of those opportunities for kids, it's impossible to do. So the rules are one thing, but what we do as a practical matter is very different.
And the importance of food service is becoming more evident. You would have seen this year in the legislative session a bill that required free food for all students in the state. It didn't pass, but it's getting that push. And my hope is that within the next few years, we will see that, because I really believe that feeding kids is as important as educating their mind. So I think it's starting to become more important, and the state's starting to understand that that's a basic requirement.
And there are districts in the state that actually provide free food for students, but they are districts that have a very high free and reduced lunch rate. For us, that's a low rate of students who qualified, despite the fact that we have, many students who are experiencing the issues with homelessness. So we have a range of students in the district that would really be hurt by not providing food for them.
Yeah, I think we can take option 3 off the table.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just been really disappointing to see the free meals program disappear this year. And I really hope it's something our government focuses on, as you can't really, receive an education if your stomach's empty and you can't concentrate, right? So absolutely option 3 should be off the table, because every student deserves access to adequate nutrition.
And even beyond that, that is absolutely true and critical, but beyond that, the social implications of being free and reduced lunch, it's still, you don't want to have that barrier to kids getting food if there's a stigma attached to it. Whereas if it's free to everyone, there's no stigma attached. Anyone can get the meals and doesn't have to pay, don't have to show up. Yeah, it's just reduces stress and provides the food. If that's actually going to keep moving forward, I would be very, very happy.
You do have a 4th option. And that is that you provide free meals, that you make that your district priority. Once again, what will you give up? And that's always the difficulty with everything we do, in every decision we make in our district, which we cannot do everything we want to do. And so what are your priorities? So I don't want to, I'm not trying to be facetious. Essentially, if you prioritized food being free for everyone at whatever that cost is, $400,000 or $500,000, that's what we would do, but we would have to give up something else.
Mr. Pullman, could you go back to that slide that showed the various costs?
So you probably would look at what the local food service sales are. So, roughly it's 125,000. It's kind of what the average is over time. So yes, if we didn't have paid meals, if every meal was free, we could still get reimbursement for those that qualified. And then, free meals for everyone else.
Yeah, as we saw in 21, 22, the numbers would go up.
Yeah. So on the other side of that, our expenditures would go up because we pay a per meal price for meals.
Mhm.
So as participation went up because it was free, such as last year, the cost of the district would also increase.
Is there a significant cost difference between, say, the food service management company and the district-run employed, the district employed option?
No, based on the research I've done, it's very comparable because included in the food service management fee is also the cost of food. So you need to subtract that out of the equation, and then it's really the amount that you're paying for the employee. So it's very comparable.
Depending on how you do it. For instance, I know that our neighbors to the north spend a very high amount of money on their food service program. They have some very good food, but they spend a lot of money on it. We want to make sure that everyone's mic'd so that we can get it on Zoom.
Check.
Does anyone know how the Coopville School District manages their meal program? It looks pretty stellar, but I have no idea.
Yes,
how they do
actually.
it.
And we have people who have firsthand knowledge, and I spent a lot of time with Steve King, who's the superintendent up there, and they have a chef that they hired and a nutritionist that they hired several years ago, pre-pandemic. And the quality of the food is outstanding. And he actually asked us for our financial picture because theirs is very different than ours. So that is a priority for that district in terms of the food they serve and the quality, but it costs.
And it's my understanding they're actually getting a deal on their chef because it's a passion project for that chef. They're paying below market rate for that.
Oh,
work.
absolutely. Yeah. And we actually talked with them. They didn't have the bandwidth to do it, but we did talk with them about doing and maybe they'll join, but I don't think so. If we do an RFP, when we do an RFP, if they want to share the service, I don't know that it'll come to pass, but we did have that conversation. But it certainly was an endeavor of passion.
My wife is a teacher up in that district, and she somewhat frequently gets their meals because they are very good. They stretch the bounds of what some students like or are interested in. Rachel can tell us, I'm sure, that chicken nuggets and pizza are a big deal down here, and you don't get that as much up there. It's goulash and Mediterranean stew, Moroccan stew. It's fantastic, wonderful food, but it's not comfort food. Yeah.
I don't know what their student participation rates are like. I didn't go that far. I just know that their expenses are much higher than their revenue.
Is there opportunity to do the opposite of pulling them into our RFP, which would be some synergy between the two districts in providing in-house meal services?
I'm sorry, Joe. I don't know what you're asking me.
I'm saying, can we partner with Coopville and spread their program to South Whidbey at a cost savings to both districts?
And that's what I asked them for. And that's where I'm saying, I don't know that they have the bandwidth.
Oh, okay.
I asked for that very thing, like, to come down, do a presentation, see if we could partner, maybe share the nutritionist or share the chef or both, while still having, an on-site person to do the day-to-day. And we just didn't get any legs on it.
All right. Thank you. Sorry for
But I did,
misunderstanding.
I knew that would be something of interest. And so we've tried to partner on a variety of things, actually. And that was one of them. And I just don't think they have the wherewithal. But I don't know. But so far, no.
That's how I heard the statement also about them joining in with us. But no, it was them throwing their hat in the ring to provide service. Yeah, and they don't have the bandwidth.
That would be the only I mean, it could be that we partner with them. That's always our option. Again, just to clarify for the board, what Dan has outlined to you is the timeline to go out for an RFP. If the district said, we want to hire our own people and do this ourselves, we can always do that unless we're under contract. So that's why it was timely to reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to partner, share the expense and see if we can do this together? We just haven't gotten any traction.
But we would need to make a decision one way or the other by May, because if the decision's RFP, it needs to go out.
I think what I
Yes.
would offer is we have our district goals and visions set from the board down. And to speak to Dr. Moshe's comment before, any shift or change as Dan is preparing the budget is going to shift and change priorities. So I also have firsthand knowledge of the Coopville food program. And what I can say is that the priority of that food program means that there aren't curriculum adoptions happening. It also means that staff members were impacted that are working at a classroom level with students. It's also created some unforeseen budgetary challenges that they're having to work through and navigate. So I think if we are talking about what is the priority of our students, and we've had that been pretty clear that we want to focus on the culture, on the community, on restorative, and on academics, I don't know that this would be the time to pivot to start focusing on nutrition. And I think that, Rachel's been exceptionally responsive with the requests of our students and the districts. And I anticipate that RFP will continue to request and convey that we want that responsiveness prioritized. But I don't know that it would be within, I don't know that it would be a good idea to look at the capacity of our current leadership team and what we know is coming up ahead and the changes that we know we're going to have to navigate budgetarily based on apportionment, regionalization, all the things, to go into, an endeavor that would run us, instead of running 200, 500,000, we would probably double that. And I don't know that that's a good use of taxpayer dollars.
You also bring up a great point, which is the one commodity that you have is time. How do you want to, besides the dollars, how do you want to prioritize the time of your team? Again, your team will do whatever the board directs it to do. But that hopefully is a consideration as well.
I should also point out that when we have a RFP for a food service management company, it's a one-year contract with 4 years that are optional renewables. So it isn't like you're locking into a 5-year agreement with this. It is just, year at a time type situations.
And what the administrative team would be looking for from the board here, since we can't make any voting decisions at a workshop, is to determine what we want to have, whether or not we want to have a vote on putting out an RFP at our business meeting, correct?
Well, yeah, what would you advise us, right? We will put it, what we will put on the agenda, you can select an RFP or not, and you can say yes or no. And at that point, if you said no, that would mean to us that you want us to seek a food service manager and dietitian. So the option will be in front of you in April. If you say no, then that's a message. And if you say yes, then that's a message.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we all knew exactly what you needed from us.
Yeah, this is just your opportunity to talk about it, and no decision tonight.
Right, because we can't.
I brought my children into this district as a parent several years prior to joining the board. And initially I recoiled from the idea of them receiving meals from an institutional vendor. And my experience as a parent and then my experience as a board member has been that the adaptation of the food service program to our community's needs and unique gifts and astounding garden program has just been way above and beyond what I could have expected. And so I feel much more confident about working with food service management companies and company in particular than I did coming in. And I just feel that rocking a boat that seems to be sailing along fairly well is maybe more effort than this district needs to exert on this topic at this time. That's my personal opinion.
And I think there's other ways we could strive, to the level of Coopville Food Service, not necessarily having that chef option. One idea where we could like engage our community as well is having, local chefs come in, possibly at the beginning of the school year and offer trainings, teaching something like Mediterranean stew or, like vegan options as well, or like gluten-free, just having a wide variety of dishes and just having the food service employees kind of have that access to that training if needed.
Professional development for all staff members rather than just the classroom ones.
On that note, I would add that just teaching children and families about the rich diversity of foods that are offered, that could be offered. Honestly, cultivating a more sophisticated palate is hard work as a parent and at home and in school and as a teacher and as a food service provider. And I just think any opportunity we have to expose ourselves and our youth to more interesting flavors and a greater diversity of whole foods, we can work to help bring more curious diners to the food that's being provided.
And I'll note that our food service program is doing some of that. On my visits, yes, there was the pizza option, but there was also, I believe it was a Chinese chicken option the day that I had lunch at the secondary school that I didn't happen to choose because I wanted to be able to walk around with the pizza. But it's harder to walk and talk with a container of Chinese food, but it looked very good. So I do know that our district is, our food service program is working on introducing some of those flavors.
It seems like we're getting nearly the quality of a Coopville style food program at less of our most two precious resources, money and time for the district. If to answer your question about direction, I would love to see, not even to the board, but just embedded within the RFP, ideas or challenges to our next vendor on how we could push that even further. Getting whatever it is, the magic that Coopville has, but with our current program and its financial and time value.
Just so you know, the RFP is very structured. It's created by the state, it's approved by the state. I modify it and send it back to them. So I'm not sure I can put language like that in there. But we certainly can have that conversation with anybody that is interested in, looking at our RFP about what our expectations are, what we're looking for in our program.
Okay,
And there's some things we
good
can
to know.
do that's outside of that particular process, I think.
Okay.
Let's get to Bill back there.
Bill Carruthers, Clinton. Just a quick question. Is there instances where you have excess food, considering good cheer and food pantries, where the excess food could be provided, or are there instances where that occurs?
So we see that a little bit during like spring breaks or Christmas breaks, right? When we leave and we've got fresh produce, we do donate to WIN, Whidbey Island Nourishes, and then they hand it out in the backpack meals or for that week that they're providing food. Day to day, if there's something we can't reuse, then we typically will put it out for any students who want seconds for free. And there are a handful of students that know that and they will swing by. And then we also work with our pocket of kids that we know are maybe higher need, and we deliver it to them as well. So that if there's additional food products at the end of the day that we can't use, pizza or whatever it is, they'll go to the kids that might be needing it more. But we first put it out for also kids that just might want a second lunch and just weren't able to get one, but we can't sell it anymore either. So does that answer your question?
Pretty much. I'm thinking of you, if you create a tray of food and you don't use it, what do you do in a situation like that? Are you allowed to not throw it away?
We could throw it away. It's pretty rare that we would throw it away. Like I said, we usually will be able to give it to students, or we donate any just whole food product to WIN. Those are typically our two go-tos.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pullman. Food service folks. Let's move on to reviewing the student board rep appointment process. As we discussed in our business meeting, a smaller group of us got together and discussed the application packet and really winnowed it down and tried to remove barriers to entry to make it available to, or make it accessible to as many people as possible. Do some of the other folks who are working on that want to talk about that more than just me prattling on?
Yeah, so pretty much we looked at different aspects of the packet. There's an area for, I guess, like a free response to kind of express, why you're interested in this position, and how you'd support student voice through it. We looked at different ways. Typically, say when I was appointed, it was a written response, but we looked at other ways where students could express this, not necessarily through an essay, but there's video options, possibly an audio response, artwork. Those are the poster as well. So we really looked at different ways students could apply and would fit their interests and needs as well. And then we also kind of looked at language to kind of have it be understandable and comprehensible. And then another thing we're looking at doing this year is putting it onto Google Form, so students can access it online as opposed to just a written packet.
One of the big things that I really liked was to remove stress from students and staff, was taking away teacher letters of recommendation and putting in references instead. So we're asking the student to provide 2 staff references that we will then contact, rather than asking them to ask a staff member to write up a letter of recommendation, because that can be a greater barrier to entry for some students. We also removed the resume because that was, we get a lot of that information already, and then it's just one more added thing that we glance at and is nice to know, but we get that other places. Added more extracurricular activities, other relevant experience information.
Real quick.
Christy's driving.
Oh, Christy, a little bit. Staff members. Perfect. Okay. I just wanted to make sure it was South Whitby staff members, not necessarily certificated.
Yes. Yeah, that's another thing that we intentionally changed, is making it any staff member.
Yeah, the theme was that we want to recognize that leadership can take a lot of different forms. And while there is certainly like a bar for, public speaking and, the ability to converse about, public education, that there could be diamonds in the rough throughout the district. And we want those students to come and apply and make sure the process is as unintimidating as possible.
We did put in a GPA note, which is in keeping with our athletic one. Thank you, Mr. Patton, for getting that language. Just to make sure that, because the student part of student representative comes first. We want to make sure that these students are doing well in their classes, are participating, are meeting requirements before they add on an additional responsibility.
If I recall correctly, we clarified an existing academic requirement, which was very vague. It said in academically good standing. And
Yes,
so
thank you.
we basically just snapped to the academic requirements for participating in extracurricular activities.
There's a typo in the third bullet, a missing word after failing one or.
Yes.
Sorry, I know it hardly matters at
No.
this stage, but I can't not say it.
We want to have it looking good. We want to be the proper example.
And then another thing I believe we changed about the application, and we also changed in our board policy about student representatives, is the requirement to attend meetings. We kind of changed that wording more to be like a commitment and encouragement to attend meetings, but not necessarily feel obligated to, be at every single one, regardless of circumstances.
For instance, one of our current student representatives is playing tennis right now, and hopefully doing us very proud and winning some matches.
And then I guess another thing we worked on is setting the dates for this year's selection process. So yeah, there's the dates shared on the screen there. And then something we're really hoping for this year is engaging one-on-one, trying to get people to apply rather than just having it something, on the district website, but bringing up in schools and creating discussions about the process, and also helping people along with the process if they have questions or concerns as well, whether it relate to the application or the position.
There was one question that the committee was unable to resolve that we are bringing to the full board right now, which is the top bullet point right now. The requirement for the student to be attending a South Whidbey School District school. And that is as opposed to attending the district, which would also include, Spokane virtual program or something that's not housed in a building. The arguments on each side were, how can a student represent other students when they're not commingling with them on a daily basis? It would be hard to do so. And then obviously the counter argument is, well, is this a form of gatekeeping, or are we excluding potential promising student board reps simply because of the program that they've chosen? And if someone could demonstrate that, despite the fact that I'm an online academy, here's my plan to engage with the student body, like, should they be allowed to apply or not? And we kind of reached reasonable minds could disagree on this and wanted to get the entire board's input.
I think I would argue that by having people represented in our alternative learning opportunities, we would gather more information about those students. And that perhaps that, an ideal world would be we would have one person from one of our comprehensive programs and one from maybe one of our alternative programs, and we would have both sides.
And just as a note, since this is a board workshop, this is not just a question for the board, it's a question for the community members who are here as well, and the administrators if they have input.
I think the growth in some of our alternative learning programs has demonstrated interest, and honestly, pathways for students in alternative learning environments to commingle with their peers is an important ingredient in an educational model. And I guess I would say that if a student lacks opportunity to commingle with peers, whether that be virtually or outside of school or through intentional school visits or what have you, maybe providing pathways for that commingling would be better than excluding that student from participation in an opportunity like this.
Maybe that's a question on the application. If you are not currently physically attending school, how would you XYZ? Because I was one of I remember chiming in, like, how would a student know what's happening and be able to engage with the board around what's happening in our schools if they're not physically there? So maybe that's the question to ask, is if you are not, how would you do this?
I could also see that being an interview question.
That's what, that's what I'm saying, is that instead of excluding them from the application, that you make it a point to ask how they plan to do that.
I like that suggestion.
I was just curious what the goal of having the students come in, is it to and do a demonstration or whatever it is that they bring in? Is it to provide you with an example of the work that's being done? Or is it for them to have experience presenting? And if the goal was for them to, I think either way, it seems like it would be a healthy thing for any child in any program, whether they're doing an online program through the school or whatever, to be able to come in. So then you can see, oh, this is what they're learning. And they can also develop a skill for presenting, which I need help with presenting as well.
So hi, I'm Audrey. I'm one of the 2 student reps on our board. The other one isn't able to make it. I was appointed 2 years ago through this packet right here. And I would say the overarching goal of the student representative is to elevate the inclusion of students in district decisions. And just including students on the board is a great way, not only to have a better understanding of how board policy is implemented through our experiences as students, but it's also a great way, for example, the student reps will attend conferences and even meet with legislators. It's a great way to really have South of East students be expressed on a national and state level as well, and share like unique experiences we have as a rural district. It's another great way to connect the board to students, right? Because I'm sitting in a classroom 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with students, and I'm able to kind of share what the board does and kind of bridge a gap. So it's not necessarily just bringing students to the board, but it's also bringing the board to students and being able to form those connections. So I think the student rep as a position serves many, many, many different roles within our district. And then we also have students present as well that would share like their experience in like, say, a social studies classroom, you know, maybe whether it be 6th grade, 8th grade, or, you know, a math classroom from 5th grade. So yeah, the student rep position is slightly different, or is different than the student presentations, but yes, public speaking is definitely something I've grown through this role. So I would say that's definitely part of it as well.
And one thing that the student reps get to do in their second year is chair a meeting. Audrey will be chairing our next business meeting at the end of this month.
I'd like to chime in. I remember talking about that bullet point, and I think it's my opinion it should be SWSD program. And the reason is you look at this, our great example of Audrey, who set the bar very, very high. She goes down and talks with our elementary students and principal and sees what's going on, not just at the high school, but also the middle school and the elementary school. So I think there's going to be avenues and opportunities no matter what program a student might be in.
And maybe this is a dumb question, but is attending a South Whidbey School District program, and I believe the other wording was like a member of the district, is that functionally the same thing at that point? Okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we should make it so it's open to all students who are enrolled in the district, and then having the students who are remote, you know, such as Running Start, be able to express how they would reach students who are in person, but not exactly setting that barrier on the application, but rather allow it for a place to be discussed.
Is there room on the application? Is there like a checkbox somewhere or something that says what school or program the student goes to? Because it would be like theoretically, the default would be the high school. But if we added space to let the student say what program they belong to, that would give us some clarity as we're looking at the application itself.
I like that a lot. And I think it also then also offers it offers an entry point for somebody who might not know that they do qualify.
Especially if it's a radio button selection. So if you select South Woodby High School, Spokane Virtual Academy, Running Start, whatever it is,
Mhm.
so they can see the options. I think that's really powerful for reducing barriers to entry.
I also think it's important that there is a connection. For example, if they attend a private school.
Oh, I think that they would have to be someone within the district programs. I think the wording there was really good because I
It is
agree that
really
it's gotta
good.
be-
There are nuances. That's all I'm saying. You can go to Running Start and be a South Woodby School District resident and not attend one of our schools. You could do it through Island Christian, for example, and go to Running Start. So there needs to be, in my opinion, at least a connection to their public school if they're going to be on this school board.
I agree 100% with that. So I would trust the experts to come up with the proper wording on that, but I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, I would also add that, their education should be primarily through some partnership with the South Woodby School District. I mean, it could be that there's a student experiencing education through another, through a private school or through another program that's entirely not related to ours. And yet you might take one class from Spokane Virtual Learning that's somehow sponsored by our district or something. I guess I would just want to let's write it in such a way that we're inviting South Woodby School District students into this opportunity.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it should be students strictly from our district, considering it's our district board. But yeah, I think a lot of students as well who are like enrolled in Running Start have like sat down in like a district classroom. Like a lot of students this year in their 11th grade started Running Start, but they're spent their other 10 years, 11 years kindergarten in a classroom. So they're able to share experiences from that.
And again, that to me is very different. Again, I'm not trying to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it's entirely possible that, we, all of our students whose families choose to homeschool them have to register through the district. They're not attending a school program, they're school district residents. That's why we originally put in South Woodby School District program school. So I think that's where we kind of hesitated on this question of what is it that the board is looking for in their student representative, someone who represents public school program and participates on their school board. I don't know how you say that in a.
So I might have some language, Dr. Moshe. When I was in my undergraduate, I was involved in school government, and I was the non-traditional student senator. So the context of that was that I supported students who didn't follow a traditional route into a four-year college, right? So I supported military veterans who were attending on the GI Bill. I supported working parents. I supported people who went and had a career and then returned to a four-year school. So we could use some language around that. So having South Woodby High School, but then having a non-traditional program and something like that, where we have those options put in. And I think that you could word that in a way where you have to have some form of tie to the district. So like, for example, Running Start with your freshman and sophomore year in South Woodby School District. Or I'm not entirely sure, Director Greenhairn would probably know better, but how we could quantify participating in the ALE program and still being part of the district. And so that there's a metrics to it. I remember when I participated in Running Start, I had to take at least one course still on campus. I don't know if that's still true for our Running Starts. Don't they get to just go?
What if they are actively pursuing a diploma from South Woodby High School or South Woodby Academy?
Yeah, I think that would be a good word.
Because then they have to be connected enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then that captures everyone.
Yep.
Right? If you're going to Running Start and you did your first 2 years here, you're going to get your diploma from South Whitby High
Yeah,
School.
I think that would be a great way to phrase it.
Right, John?
So I think we can keep that line, but just change that first bullet
Yeah.
point. Yeah. Actively.
With Christie.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
Then we can just see the final version when we're ready to vote. We don't need to vote on this. Nope. So we can trust y'all to get the right wording and we'll get it out to students. Thank you for that. Anything else to add on this topic?
I think it's awesome and a lot better than what we've been working from.
Yeah, we went from 9 pages to 5 or 6.
I just want to thank everyone who took the time to be on the committee. And I also agree it's improved, but it's good to hear from someone who wasn't on the committee.
Okay, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you. Good night.